I'm not sure how many of you have noticed, but in the last 7 weeks, across the country, gasoline prices have spiked about 70 cents a gallon. I teach a class at Arizona State University, and the first week of January, my class is on energy policy and the environmental policy of the nation. I always ask my students to take note of the gasoline price at the start of the class, and then watch it over the 15-week course of the semester. So in Phoenix, Arizona, gasoline was $2.96 on the first week of January. This past Thursday, when I was out in Tempe, $3.74. And so I asked my students, because they're studying this, why is the gasoline price rising? What's behind it? And I get a lot of very curious eyes waiting for me to give them the answer. And as I visit with people like yourselves all over the country, ladies and gentlemen, it's painful to remind ourselves that this is the 5th January in a row. 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. The 5th January in a row that this nation has seen the crude oil price rise dramatically in the first quarter, the retail gasoline price rising right along with it, and then sometime around July, August, September, it starts to drift downward a bit. But as you can hear from the media reports, the rise this year is bigger and higher, faster than in the previous 4 years. What's going on? Is this the oil companies just deciding it's time to dig into our pocketbooks? Is it some natural event that somehow in winter we use more fuel than summer, when the opposite is actually true? We use less in winter than in summer. Is it the turnarounds in the refineries that shut down manufacturing production temporarily to do maintenance and get rid of obsolescent equipment and processes in refineries that happens this time every year? Or what is it? I'll give you the simplest explanation I can offer. It's none of the above. It's the fact that we as a nation have allowed ourselves over decades, not years, decades, from Richard Nixon to today, while declaring the intention to become more energy independent, we have remained at the mercy of a cartel pricing scheme that is designed not by oil companies, not by U.S. government, not by some natural convolution of fate, but by a group of sovereign nations who export oil for a living, who decide the production level to achieve the price level that they would like to see fill their treasuries every year, so that they can pay their bills and enjoy the lifestyles that they choose in those countries that produce and export oil. We are at the mercy of a pricing cartel of OPEC producers, and have been for decades. And it's no coincidence that we went from $82, $83, $84 a barrel crude oil in the October-November timeframe to the high 80s and now to the 90s, when in December of 2012, one of the largest producers in the world, in fact, the largest producer in the world, Saudi Arabia, reduced oil production by 900,000 barrels a day and kept that lower production level in the month of January. Now, in the face of European recession, in the face of the U.S. economy actually having negative growth in the fourth quarter by 0.1%, in the face of doubt around China's true growth rate, in the face of Japan, world's third largest economy, flat down economy for the last 20 years, in the face of all this negative economic information, It's not that demand has risen, it's that supply has shrunk. And that is the primary reason that we are seeing in each and every of the last 5 years an adjustment by OPEC producers that has impact on the global oil price, and we become the victims. But are we the victims of OPEC, or are we the victims of ourselves when this plays out, spring after spring? Now, when we look ahead, set OPEC aside, when we look ahead at the future global demand for oil and what's going to happen over the next 10 or 20 years, there will be people who will tell you it's time to go off oil. I wouldn't be happier, couldn't be happier to go off oil. Because as an oil executive, when I would look honestly into the eyes of a customer and realize that the gasoline that they are buying is going into an internal combustion engine vehicle that is going to operate at 20% efficiency, which means that 80 cents on the dollar that they are spending for gasoline is going to be wasted as heat and friction in the vehicle, and only 20 cents on the dollar is actually buying the go juice that gives them mobility. I have to wonder about my own integrity in selling you a product that you're only going to use at a rate of 20% efficiency. It's like selling you a light bulb where the efficiency is 3%. Or it's like selling you a solar system where the efficiency is only 8 or 9%. You're not getting a lot for your money when you're buying something that is terribly inefficient. But the internal combustion engine is the best we've had from a mobility standpoint. And we're at the point now in this country where 250 million vehicles are on the road today that only use gasoline or some combination with ethanol. And so there's no competition for transportation fuel. Battery vehicles are just barely breaking into the market. Not in material numbers, not that make a difference. And they're not going to in the coming years. Not at the price tag, and not with the uncertainty over battery life and how long you can drive an electric vehicle. Hybrids make it a little bit better. But we're going to be stuck with oil and gas, the path we're on, for a long time to come. So are we going to still suffer high-priced OPEC pricing? But I said, set OPEC aside. Let's look at the future of world oil supply in the next 10, 20, 30 years. The existing basins around the world give us about 88 million barrels a day. We're pushing it to get 88 million barrels a day. The U.S. uses about 18 of those 88 million barrels a day. We're the primary user of global oil. We produce in this country just under 7 million barrels a day out of the 18 million that we need. That means we need a lot of oil for both feedstocks, for our chemical industry, but also for transportation and aviation and trucking and marine and other applications like lubricants. And so we have to have imported oil to meet our daily requirements. But if we look at our consumption of 18 million barrels a day, let's look at China for a moment. In 2005, China consumed 5 million barrels a day. In 2011, 10 million barrels a day. By 2015, China is going to need 15 million barrels a day. That's a huge increase in demand on a daily basis. And India will go from 4 to 7 million barrels a day demand over the next 5 years. And the rest of the developing world, 1 or 2 million barrels a day. So if you just do the math, over the next 5 to 6 years, ladies and gentlemen, we have to go from 88 million barrels a day to 98 million barrels a day just to stay even with demand. And frankly, nobody knows how to do that. Our increase of 5 million to 7 million in the last 2.5 years has been a godsend. But it's still only 7 in a country that needs 18. So as we look ahead, we are going to be competing on a continuing basis with the rest of the world for the oil that we need just to get through the day. And if you look at what's talked about as future development basins off Brazil, those of you who follow this industry, huge oil deposits in what's called the pre-salt off of the east coast of Brazil. Or the Arctic, which has billions of barrels in the Arctic Circle. Or East Africa, more billions of barrels not touched yet. Mozambique, Madagascar, not even touched. Off West Africa's coast, barely touched. So there's all kinds of oil out there to be had. But let's be clear, it's not in the next 10 years. In Brazil, it's so deep and so close to the magma of the earth that what's holding back major production is that the metallurgy of the industry is not equal to the heat and pressure of the earth. The metal gets soft. You can't drill with a soft drill bit. And so metallurgists are working with nanotechnology to harden metals beyond what we've ever known as hard metals. Off the east coast of Africa, Mozambique, Madagascar, Tanzania, Kenya. Huge, huge new discoveries. But there's no infrastructure. Not only is there no physical infrastructure, which you need to obviously drill and transport oil, there's no legal infrastructure. There are no institutions of government that can create the legal infrastructure that's credible in terms of contract and contract law and adjudication. It's never been necessary. It's never existed. It has to be invented. And it needs to be invented in a way so that corruption and shifting of dollars paid into the countries to private bank accounts in Switzerland doesn't harm either the countries or the industry that's trying to develop that. Arctic Circle, my former company, has been trying over the last 7 years, almost 8 years, to get into the Arctic Circle off the coast of Alaska. I was part of starting that process back in the 2005 to 2008 period. It's now 2013. They have yet to produce a gallon of crude oil. But that's according to plan. There was never a plan to rush because the Arctic is different. You have got to have the technology and the environmental protections and the skill and ability to pursue drilling or development of the Arctic Circle very different than the Gulf of Mexico. And it would be a learning journey. But material oil from the Arctic could well be in the 2030s, not the 20-teens. And so when you think of that 98 million barrel of demand, and you think about what we do every day to struggle to get to 88 million, and you think of the U.S. at 7 million, these numbers aren't going in the direction of the consumer. These numbers are going in the direction of pain at the pump.